Hey, what's up? It's Autumn, and this is Just a Thought. Hey, welcome back. Hope you guys have had an amazing week. All right, today, another just amazing conversation that we're about to have. I am excited myself for this conversation because I've had smaller conversations like this with Rob, my guest today. And he just continues to always just bless me with so many just gems and nuggets of wisdom and encouragement and perspective. And I know he's going to do the same thing today for you. So y'all getting ready to get the blessing that I always get. But before we get into that, I'm going to introduce him so that you know who we dealing with today. So Rob is a healthcare administrator with over 28 years of experience. 11 of those years were invested in biomedical engineering. Smart. Okay. Coupled with 4 years in each of the medical group operations, research, and care standardization. His passion lies in integrating technology, operational efficiency, and evidence-based care to drive health equity across all aspects of healthcare delivery, which is near and dear to my heart. I love it. Rob has served on several nonprofit boards in both Pennsylvania and Delaware, and he invests his time in mentoring, creating art. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about that, Rob. I don't think that we've talked about that, but I want to hear more about that. Okay, and expanding his capacity to love, which I love that. Thank you for sharing and incorporating that piece of yourself into your bio because that is important. I also want to say this, Rob. You the first one. Now I'm gonna give you half points. You ain't gonna get a full point for this, but you're gonna get a half point for being the first guest that I've had to send their bio over. You the first one I didn't have to create a bio for. But I'm gonna give you a half a point because I had to remind you.
Well, that's true. You did have to remind me. But I delivered.
But you deliver, and you always do. And that's what I appreciate about you. So thank you for being on today. I'm happy to have you. I'm excited. You ready?
I'm excited. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. And let's get into it. What you got?
Okay, let's get into this. So let me just to give some context to the conversation and our relationship first, is that when I first met Rob, I was transitioning. I was transitioning from one organization, one just career field into a completely different one. And I was terrified for so many reasons. But one of those, the biggest reasons was because of just negotiations and money and salary and what did that look like. And I think a lot of people really struggle in that area to take those leaps, but more so to understand how to value themselves in that space. I know what I think I bring, but does that really translate to other people seeing that same level of value? And how do I communicate that through perks, benefits, salary, whatever, like all of those things moving into a different space? And so I want to start off with this little piece, and then this is going to carry us, I think, into a lot of different places. So, Rob, if you could give some perspective on what it actually looks like to bet on yourself in real life, and how can someone really start like doing that today?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me? Is the
I
volume
can.
okay? Okay, you
Mm-hmm.
can. I think for me, when you say bet on yourself, it
Mm-hmm.
starts with self-awareness. Some people think bet on yourself is jumping out there and just taking opportunity and not knowing how it's going to play out. But I think betting on yourself starts with self-awareness because that's where a lot of growth happens. And when you're betting on yourself, you have to expand your growth because you're getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So getting out of your comfort zone requires you to be self-aware. Self-aware allows you to self-regulate along that path.
Mm-hmm.
At times it's mental. It's mental. Initially, we think it's our competencies, our capabilities, our knowledge base. Once you start to have degrees and you have experience and you have knowledge base, then we start to look at, okay, well, can you sustain this? Are you able to handle change?
That
Are,
part.
are you able to handle conflict? Are you able to handle ambiguity? Are we
Right.
able to handle that? And what you find is people can be very talented, right? And have a high aptitude, but then their attitude impacts the next level.
Right.
So they have this thing. I think Les Brown said it. He says you can have a yes I can attitude and a no I can't aptitude.
Mm.
Think it can go the other way around. You can be the most skilled, the most talented, but not have the attitude to be able to function in different work environments. So I think betting on yourself starts with self-awareness for me.
That's really good. I appreciate you saying that because I think a lot of people, to your point, get focused in if I just get the next certification, if I just take the next class, if I just get the next degree, if I just get the next. And quite honestly, I think I read somewhere, and because what you're talking about plays into like emotional intelligence as well. That's one of the highest indicators of how successful a person is going to be is
Mhm.
how emotionally intelligent they are, understanding themselves, other people, you know what I mean? Just those kinds of things. So that's really good. That's really good that you started there. And so to that point, right? Like let's say you got all those things. Or you trying to. And now you are like, all right, aside from the degrees, because I think that those just are sort of are what they are. And let's take this even a step further. For individuals who don't have degrees, because that's a demographic as well. And those individuals have just as much value and in some spaces even more because their level of experience of actually doing things and not just having the book smarts about it, but the actual application of the things that they know. How does that translate into me being able to sell myself, being able to ask for, what I believe I'm worth, or even understanding what I'm worth?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, when I think about that, if you because you asked a pretty broad
I
question.
did. I did. I
Yeah,
know.
pretty broad question. But if we hone in and we
Okay.
focus specifically on those that may not have the degrees
Uh-huh.
for a job, I think in that situation you need to understand what the requirements are, right? What are the requirements? Because even though you may not have the degree, can you speak to the requirements
Mm.
of the job?
Okay.
Not just speak to it as if you are familiar with it, but you have examples of ways you have demonstrated capabilities in those spaces. If
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have the degree, I
Right.
also think it's relationship driven because there's times where you can get a role you don't have a degree for if you have a strong enough relationship for that person to be willing to take a chance on you. But then
That's
they may say to you, but within the first 12 months, you need to get that certification, or within
mhm.
the first 12 months, you need to have that degree. They may put some stipulations to the role, but I think in that situation, you really want to be able to speak to what they're looking for. You
Yeah.
definitely, and I'm gonna tell you this: if you're able, because sometimes if you don't have the degree, you don't even get the interview.
Right.
If you are able to get the interview without the degree, then that means you have a chance to articulate your competencies and what you're able to do. Now, sometimes you never even get the conversation. You don't get the interview. They're saying, hey, you don't meet the minimum requirements. We're
Right.
not going to pass you forward for an interview. So it just depends on hiring managers as well.
So, and speaking with that, right, and because I just want to take this a little bit more personal. There are certain standards that the world has created to say this is a value and this is not. And so, when, which is not necessarily true, and that can really play havoc, right, on you feeling like why even try? But we have a lot of examples too of people who have done great and amazing things and not have the traditional, right? The traditional what people say is what you're supposed to have. What are your thoughts on how people can just internally continue to keep their head up and feel like I do have value and worth and I do have something to offer, and
Uh-huh.
let me figure out how I can believe that so I can make other people believe it.
Well, it depends on what type of worth we're talking about.
Mhm.
Are we talking about self worth? Because to me, what I hear you saying is self worth, still feeling that you are important and that you do add value.
Yeah.
Can all be true, but you may not be the best person for the job.
True.
So
True.
we can't confuse our self worth with our ability to do a job.
True. True. This is true. Listen, because I do want my surgeon to have a degree, and they have to.
I'm just saying, if you have
They
a
have to.
lawyer, and
Yep.
this is your lawyer, you want your lawyer to be qualified.
On point.
Yeah,
Yes.
they may have all the experience they want to have, but listen, where did you train at?
Right.
What cases have you won? I mean, I need to understand that. And so I just think
Please and thank you. Yeah.
I just think I don't want to confuse people where their self-worth is tied to what they're capable of getting a job in. Because I
That's
don't
good.
think that they should be married together. Self-worth should not, just because I have a degree doesn't mean my self-worth should be higher than somebody else's.
It's
Right.
true.
I just don't feel that way personally.
Right.
But I do think about adding value. Right. And
Right.
so if I'm a hiring manager and I'm looking for a role to be filled, a lot of times you're trying to fill a role that you don't want to have to do. You're filling it. Because if I put somebody in a role and I still have to do the role while they're in the role, I have the wrong person.
Right.
Right. And so that's the nuance when you're a leader in a leadership role. And you also have to think about the morale of the team. So if I have a team already that is an effective team, an efficient team, and then I bring somebody on the team that may lack some of the expertise, that team may be able to absorb that and help that
Yeah.
person learn because you have multiple people that can help that person grow. But if
Right.
I have a team already struggling, and they may not have all the most experience and skills, and not bringing somebody else that doesn't have the skills or experience, that's going to impact, that's going to magnify the challenges we're already facing, because the time that they're spending that they don't have time, so we need another person, they now need to dedicate to training another person,
Right.
which means
Right.
they're not even able to do what they were doing before. So I just
Right.
think it's unique to the situation. But if you're talking about specifically self-worth, and as it pertains to your resume, the things you've done, I would say this. Number one, you need to be able to tell your story better than anyone else. Okay.
Um,
If you look at my resume and there's a gap in your resume, you don't wait for somebody to bring up the gap. You
right.
start with the gap.
Right. Right.
Because if I look at a sheet of paper and I've never met you, I'm going to make my judgment on you based upon what I'm reading.
Right.
Some people present very well on paper, but when
And
you
horrible in person.
meet them in person, you say, huh, okay, they can't even give me examples of these things they say they've already done.
Not huh,
And
Rob.
then you have some that they don't necessarily have a tight resume, but when you meet them in person, you're like, wow,
Right.
person's amazing, right?
Right.
But their resume may not read that way. So,
Right.
so what I would say is you always want to be able to tell your story better than anyone else.
I
There's
love
there's times where I've been in roles for 7 years. There's two times in my career where I was in roles for 7 years. And so typically people say you want to do 3 to 4 and then you want to be kind of thinking about what comes next.
right.
But if you're on a role for 7 years, sometimes they say, oh, well, he may be done. We don't see him going any further. He may be done. But what I said to people is if you look at those 7 year times I was in a role, also look at that I was also in school. So
Right.
I point them to the degrees and when I
The
was
reason.
thing as
Right.
well, so that they understand, yes, I might have spent 7 years in this particular job, but I was also back in school. So I wasn't jumping jobs while I'm getting my education. I needed to stay somewhere I felt pretty much comfortable in what I was doing. Didn't require me to do extra mental gymnastics while I'm in
Right.
school at the same time. And once I was able to tell that story and show that alignment there, they said, oh, okay, that's a really good point. And I said, if you see that, that's been 2 times, and both times I went back to school. And so,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So I just think, again, you have to be able to tell your story though.
I think that's good. And you know what? You introduced another point too, because that just shows how things are changing, right? They used to be, our parents and their parents, the thing that felt most valuable
Mhm.
was longevity, right? The fact that you were in the same place, the same, you know what I mean? Like for years. And that actually showed something. And now this idea of really embracing and seeing change as growth and development and investment not only in yourself, but in the organization as a positive, right? Or to different organizations, right? Giving yourself other opportunities to add value in different spaces. It just shows how, the perspectives are changing.
That is true. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad you point that out, because I was at the last organization I was there for a long time, over 20 years, right?
Mhm.
In that situation, some organizations would assume like, uh-oh, can he work somewhere else?
Right.
Can he survive somewhere else?
Right.
And one company, this was years ago, asked me that question. And I said, well, just because you work in an organization doesn't mean that organizations don't have subcultures. You have the culture of the organization, but then departments and certain modalities have their own subcultures within that organization.
Right.
I pointed out to them, I said, well, look, I've been in 9 different roles, um, different departments, and been successful
Right.
in all of them. So don't assume just because you're a part of a certain organization that everyone functions the same, because they don't when you're part of a multi-billion-dollar company. Now, of course, some of those smaller companies, yes, they're not as large. They don't have as much structure. So it's
Right.
a little more intimate. But when you've been somewhere of a large multi-billion-dollar company, then yes, long as you're willing to be able to move around, demonstrate you can survive in other places, you can still use that as a way of telling your story of
Absolutely.
ability to be able to be in other environments and still perform and succeed. So
I love that. I love the storytelling, and I like how you threw that in there. You were like 9 different departments successfully.
yeah, yeah. Listen,
That part on that successfully.
people to tell your story. I'm telling you, you have to be able to tell your story.
Indeed.
It's a skill. I'm glad you pointed that out. The art of
Yes.
storytelling is important.
Very much so. In
Yes.
so many spaces.
Mhm.
And so thank you for that, because that seems to be kind of a little bit of a theme that I have been hearing over the past couple weeks, just within my own life and in a couple different sectors. I think that's just confirmation that it is. It's really important. And quite honestly, people like stories. They like to be taken on a journey. They lead me, guide me somewhere, show me where we going, and make me feel something along the way. So being able to do that really is an art.
Yeah.
Um,
I think people, they tend to be able to absorb stories better.
mhm.
I mean, if you
Yeah,
think about it, as children, we were taught through parables. The boy that cried wolf,
right.
tortoise and the hare.
Mhm.
All those are stories and parables that we never forget. You can ask children right now, and they can tell you that story that we learned years and years and years ago. I'm not gonna say my age, but so long ago. We all know those stories, right? So, so there's obviously mentally and psychologically a way for us to hold on to things in story form. If we want to be remembered, and we know naturally we remember things in story form, we've been taught that since children.
Right.
Why not still use that as a leader, as a parent, as an active member of your community,
Right.
leverage, you know.
I love that. I love that. And they talk about that even when you're learning to become an effective speaker, that really grabs your audience when you can start with a story that people can identify with. It also, to your point, closes the gap. There may be ideas, really complex or lengthy sort of, ideas that you want an audience to understand and grasp, because you don't have time to sit here and tell them the whole thing. And a story helps like quickly level set and bring you guys all into the same place. So um, I love that. Okay, so now I'm understanding this piece, right? About growing, learning that I need to be competent. I know I need to be able to be realistic and honest about, do I have what this role requires in order for me to jump out there. And this is because this is something that I very specifically like kind of talked to you about, even with myself, that I was struggling and grappling with. Should I do this? Should I not? Should I stay where I am? Is it time to pivot? Do I leave? Do I know? And I know that you yourself have recently grappled and gone through this. And so your thoughts on, or advice, some of the things that you did, some of the things you talked to me about, of how someone can understand what season they are in professionally. Should they stay and grow? Should they pivot within their organization?
Mhm.
Or is it time to like, is it time to leave?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it depends on the person's life situation,
Mm,
because sometimes when you take chances that are very gray and we don't know how they're going to play out, you also got to think about who else does it impact. Does it just impact
right.
you? Does it impact your family? Does it impact where you live? It could be different things that are impacted with those decisions. So I think that should be thought about. We can't make a decision like that in isolation.
Right.
We think it's just us. Like nothing else will be impacted. If there's other things that will be impacted, you should think of them. I,
Wisdom. That's wisdom.
yes, you should definitely think about them. I think other things you should do is have conversations with those that you have high regard for. So let's
Mm,
say a mentor. You should definitely have some mentors in your life, and
yeah.
Don't look for one mentor to do every aspect of your life, because that's not necessarily ideal.
Right.
What happens is you can attract mentors and you can go try to find mentors. I think there's a lot of power in attracting mentors. So how do you attract a mentor?
Yeah.
Attract a mentor by, no matter what you're doing, always putting your best foot forward, right?
Okay.
You attract a mentor by honoring your word.
Right.
You attract a mentor by asking for more responsibility,
Mm.
right? That's how you start.
Good. That's good.
So a part of my journey, career wise, is I was able to attract mentors by volunteering to do things for them, even though I don't work directly with them,
Mm.
volunteering to do things for them. So there may be a project that my department doesn't necessarily support, but I know it's something I'm interested in doing and wanted to learn about doing.
Right.
And I would find who the leader is of that who's the owner of that process, who's the champion at the higher levels, that make the decisions of who can be a part of what,
Right.
have the authority to make the decision. And I would go ask them, hey, could I be a part of that? Is there
That's
something
good.
to support that effort?
That's good.
Sometimes the answer is yes, because they would love to have more people that are willing to do some work.
Absolutely.
Now this is the nuance though. Now that leader would then need to talk to who I do report
Okay.
to see if they can make space and time for me to do that.
Right.
But you have to express the desire for that first before
Absolutely.
the conversation can even happen. And you need to think about what you can get out of it. Even though you're helping, it's like, well, what can I learn? Can I learn something out of it?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way you can attract a mentor. Another way you can attract a mentor is to always be where they are. What I
Okay.
mean by that is when they go speak somewhere, you're there and you say hello, hey, how you doing? Right? If they have a seminar they're offering, or you see they're on a panel, you show up. Okay. You find yourself sitting in rooms where they are. You may not be in their meetings because you're not at that level to be in their meetings, but a lot of leaders tend to do other things outside of their role. They may be running the 5K. Now, I'm not saying you need to run the 5K. You might want to support the 5K. If they're raising money,
Hand out water.
I'm just saying you might want to hand out. You find yourself being where they are. They see you enough. They say, well, who is this person? What's going
Right.
on? And then
Right. Right.
realize that you're active.
Right. Right.
And so just keep that in mind. So there's subtle things you can do to attract. As far as asking for, specifically asking for somebody to mentor you, I think you need to be specific on what you want them to mentor you on.
Mm.
So you just can't say, oh, can you be my mentor? That's too broad.
Right.
You may say, hey, I love the way you run meetings.
Right.
I've been a part of your meetings. They're super effective. Is there any way you would be willing to mentor me on the technique that you use or how you got there? And they may say, oh, you know what? Because some things they're fascinated about, they just don't know others are fascinated about the same.
Right. That's good. Yeah. That's
And then
good.
they say, okay, do this, read this book, do this, do that. Um,
Right.
you have to be able to execute upon that. So
Good. That.
that's key. So I'm gonna hit you with one other thing. When I did my master's, and I had to do a thesis, what I did it on was the underrepresentation of minorities in senior leadership positions within health systems and the barriers that contribute to the lack of representation.
That's deep, Rob. Go ahead. I'm
And so
listening.
when I did that, a couple of things came out as barriers that contributed to the lack of representation
Mm-hmm.
in senior leadership positions. One of the things that came up was mentorship, the lack of mentorship, and the lack of sponsorship.
That part, a champion, having a champion.
Both of those are important. They're not
Yeah.
the same role. Somebody can
Right.
serve both, but they're not the same role.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so sometimes we think a mentors, especially biracial mentorship, based upon the research, biracial mentorship tends to be more instructional.
Mm.
Do this, and this, and come back.
Right. Right.
They may not be asking you about the kids or, how
Right.
weather and what are you doing over the summer. They may not get very into your personal business, but they will give you instruction of
Right.
what you need to do. And you need to take that instruction and come back.
Mm-hmm.
Other mentors may be more relational. They may want to know everything about you, what makes you tick, all your aspirations. And they may so we have to be able to adjust to the mentor. We
Right.
want the mentor to adjust to us. That's not the way that works.
Right.
They already have theirs. We're
Right.
get ours. So so if somebody's willing to give you meetings and give you time,
Right.
let you, be willing to adjust to their style
Yeah.
and not be like, well, I don't like they don't ask me enough questions, or let's not complain about what they're not doing. Let's
Right.
figure out what you can learn from them that they're willing to share. So that's something else.
Right.
Um, I would say.
That's good. So I've actually had in the across the different roles that I've been in, I've had people ask me to mentor them.
Mhm.
And I always have like sort of these questions like before I say yes, because I don't say yes to everybody. One, because I just don't have time. So I'm not in the business of wasting my time, my own time. I'm not going to let you waste my time either. So let's just make sure that we're a good fit. Um, so one is me asking them straight up, what is it that you want from me? So that I understand whether or not I have it to give. People I really want you to meet with me all the time. I want to talk. I want this. I want that. And I'm like, bro, I don't have time in my life right now for that. Or, yep, absolutely great. I can certainly do that. The other thing that I talk to them about is, are you willing to hear hard things? Because if you're not, then what you want is a friend. And I don't.
That's true.
That's not what I'm looking to do. I'm extremely honest. I'm to the point. I'm gonna say things that you may not necessarily want to hear, but that's where growth happens. And are you in a place that you are open to receiving like legit feedback that may not make you feel good? And that's, so that's if they're like, yep, cool. And then the other thing is just, do you have the ability to respect time? So I don't, if we are supposed to have an appointment and then I can't make it or this, that, and the other, that's a surefire way to get me to be like, okay, I wish you the best.
That is true. That is
Yeah. I wish you the
one
best.
one thing I do all those things you just mentioned. There's one other thing I do when I'm mentoring. I say to them, I need you to promise that you're willing to do this for somebody else.
That's
Because
good.
because nothing's free.
Right.
Nothing's free.
Right.
You either pay now or pay later, but there's something to pay for everything. And so
Absolutely.
you may not necessarily owe me anything personally, but the fact that I'm taking this time to work with you, I need you to commit that you will take this time to work with someone else that can do nothing for you. But
I'm gonna add that, Rob. I'm gonna
because I
steal that from you.
think that's important that people understand it's just not about you.
Right.
You is to help you also be able to impact others. So it's bigger than just us as an individual. So I think that's important. Another thing you asked about when you asked the broad question about how do you make these decisions, the difference between advice and counsel. Advice and counsel is not the same thing.
Right.
Advice is
Right.
opinion, what they think, what a person think. Oh yeah, I think that would be nice for you. Counsel is a person that's based on their experience.
Come on. That's good. That's good.
So you want to seek counsel.
Wise counsel.
You want to seek counsel. If
Yeah.
I have problems with my blood pressure, I'm not going to a lawyer
Right.
for advice. Just not doing it. I'm gonna say I might tell we may share that experience. Like, oh, your blood pressure's high too. Okay. Oh, what
Right.
did you do? But that but I'm gonna go to a doctor.
Right. Right.
I'm gonna go to a doctor. So I say,
Right.
hey, if you're gonna make some of these moves that may be a, a big leap or a big jump, try to find some counsel. You can get advice from some people that you trust, but look for counsel. Look for those
Yeah.
that may have done it before. Look for those that may be able to share with you some of the pitfalls in making those decisions, even if they just help you think it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Understand too.
That's
It's
good.
it's it's a move. It's not the final move. And I think we
Right.
talked about this. It's a decision, not your final decision.
Right. Right.
And sometimes we'll make more out of everything we do. We'll make so much out of the decision we can't make one because we made so much out of it. And
Have us paralyzed. Can't move.
we'll be paralyzed. And so
Yeah.
the thing is, I always think about a move from a perspective of if I make this move, am I prepared to handle the worst case scenario?
Okay.
Like say
Okay.
I make the move and it doesn't work out. Will I
Right.
stay okay? Am I in position? How long do I have finances to sustain me until I find the next opportunity? Like what's the worst case scenario? If I'm prepared for the worst case scenario, then it's all up from there. I mean, everything
Yeah.
else
All
is
good.
right. Everything else is up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, everything is up. And so when you ask people, because I think this falls right in line, when you ask people what's the best decision they ever made, what they typically tell you is the best outcome they ever had.
Mm.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay. When you ask people what's the best
Good.
decision they've ever made, they tend to tell you the best outcome they ever had.
Right.
Because I ask somebody, I'll say, I want you to tell when I'm mentoring, I say, I want you to tell me the best decision you ever made. It can't be family related.
Okay. Gotta make it clear.
They'll talk about houses or they'll talk about the children. I said, you can't use those. What is the best decision you ever made?
That's hard.
A lot of times people will tell you the best outcome they ever had.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna tell you this. This is where the nuance comes in. Since people tend to think about their decisions based on the outcome, there are times where I'll say to people, well, if you drive home drunk and you get home safe, does that mean you made a decision?
Right. Right. The answer would be no.
You a good outcome,
Right. Right.
but
Right. But the decision was not good.
right, you didn't make a good decision. But what
Right.
happens when you get home after you've been drinking one time? They say, oh, well, I did it before, I can do it again. Oh, so now it reinforces that decision of driving home drunk because you got home safe one time,
Right.
right? Until it doesn't work out. So
Right.
once I put it that way, I basically tell people you can, if you can make a bad decision but get a good outcome, it can go the other way around where you make a really good decision at the time based on what you know from your fact finding, but it doesn't play out the way you thought it should.
Right.
Does that mean you made the wrong decision? No. No, you still made a good decision. It just
Right.
didn't work out. But guess what happens when it doesn't work out? We don't want to make those decisions anymore. So then
Right.
what, even though it was a good decision. Now, in that situation, there may be one or two things you just didn't know at the time to even ask. Sometimes
Right.
you know what you don't know because you haven't been there.
Right.
So if I make a good decision based on what I know at the time and it does not work out, it doesn't mean don't make that decision again. It just means I may need to ask some more questions. There's some things I just didn't understand. Some of these circumstances were out of my control. There wasn't something I could have done about it. It just didn't work out. And that's the nuance that I think we face a lot, especially when we think about moving to new roles and new experiences. We tend to think the way it plays out tells me if I made a good decision or not. And
Right.
that's not
That's so good.
not at
That
least not
is
all the time.
so good. That is so good. First of all, I'm gonna have to think about that for myself. I like when you asked that, I was like, oh my God, I gotta really sit with that and think and with those boundaries, with those caveats, like think about it from that way. Cause you're right. We do. It's like, oh, if the thing worked out, man, this is the best thing that I ever did. And it's like, well, was it though? Like, man, that I think that also allows you to get into a space where you give like grace for the decisions and to still hold it separate and apart. To not be like, oh man, I was stupid for doing that because of X, Y, and Z. No, actually you weren't. That was still the right thing to do at the time with what you knew. And yeah, that's really, really good. Thank you for that. I'm thanking you for me for that, Rob.
You're welcome. But I think to me, because I had the same response when I learned that, like, wow,
Yeah.
well, that's deep. Okay. I need to really think about when I'm making decisions, is it a good decision? That's
Right.
focus. Not if because I can't always control how it plays out.
But that's what we want to do, man. We're
Right.
trying to control outcomes.
Well, we won't even make the decision if we don't know the outcome. We say, well,
Right.
if I do this and it's then okay, I'm gonna do it because I know what the outcome's gonna be. But that's not how life works.
Right.
Like, it ain't nothing in life guaranteed where I say if I take this, I'm going to be promoted in 3 years. If I take this now, I will be this next year. No, somebody may promise you a promotion when you take a role at that initial time, but then let's just say something happens, they restructure something like that. That opportunity no longer exists. It didn't work
Right.
the way they thought it would. They didn't necessarily lie to you. The situation has changed. The climate has changed. The work environment has changed. The payment structure has changed. Things have changed outside of their control. So now you don't get what you thought you was going to get. Does it still
Right.
mean you made a bad decision? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. That's
But
good for life.
yeah, but
That's
people got
that's
to
not
think
even
about
just
that.
in business. That's life.
Marriages, all type of things.
All of it.
Sometimes,
All of it.
and so then the other flip side, back to what I was saying is, if our energy is focused to making really good decisions, then that's when you seek counsel and you do all these other things because you want to make the best decision you can at the time based on what you know.
Right.
Because you can learn things once you get there that you didn't know it.
Right.
You didn't even
Right.
know these people worked here,
Right.
when I applied for
Right. Right.
some
And
just
to that point,
right,
leaving room for that. Right. Leaving room for that.
right, right,
Yeah.
right. And so
You.
that I think that plays another part to your overall overarching question of when you're making a decision,
How
what
do you know?
oh, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
How do you know?
is this a good decision? And then the other thing before you go on is, am I making this decision from a place of fear?
Mm.
Am I making this decision from more not of a scarcity mindset, but of a abundance mindset.
Right,
Right?
right,
Fear
right,
come from a place of scarcity, fear.
right,
But is this a fear like, oh, I got to do something now, out of fear, or is it out of, okay, I see possibilities. This could be something.
right,
I can learn this. What for me? I have to ask myself that. Where am I coming from when I'm making?
right, right. Well, I think to that point, so a couple things, because you said a lot of really good things. So I'm gonna make a couple points, and then I'm gonna ask you just to clarify one thing before we move on. One, because I think that was one of the questions that you asked me, right? Am I running from something or towards something? Which I think is what you're talking about with fear.
Mhm.
When I was making this shift, and that is, you're right. It's like, don't do something because you're running away from something. Do it because you're running towards an opportunity, growth, development, open doors, whatever that may look like,
Mhm.
which is really good. Sometimes that can get confusing in our own mind. The other thing that I just wanted to add to what you were saying, as far as just thought processes, to me, and I think that this is, once you have been a leader, and I know that you are going to identify with this completely, but not everybody has, I think, walked in leadership spaces. And so just giving this perspective, once you have been a leader, you understand that you are the lid of the organization, that everybody that's under you can only go as high as you go, and as high as you will allow that organization, that department, that project, whatever it is, to go. So either you as the leader, you have to continue to keep growing, so that everybody and everything under you can keep growing, or you're either going to, one, stifle people that they can go no further, or two, they're going to leave. Because if they have this mentality where they have, like, literally outgrown this environment, like they are busting at the seams, and you've given them no room or area to be able to expand and to keep, progressing this thing, they're going to find someplace else to do it. And so I think if you're a person who is under leadership or under an organization that has a tight lid, they're not constantly growing and progressing and trying to, figure out the next thing for their people, and all that other kind of stuff, that I think you would kind of feel that I keep hitting resistance every time I'm trying to do and to get better. It's just, there's no room for it here, and maybe that's a thing to consider. So I'll let you, give your perspective on that. But I also want to make sure you mention mentorship and, like, sponsorship and champion, and I just want people to understand what that means to have a sponsor or a champion. Like, what does that look like?
Okay. So, because you asked a really good question about before you asked the sponsor and mentor, because I want to talk about those, but I'll remember those. So, what I initially was thinking when you mentioned the lid, the type lid, and the ability to not be able to ascend
Yeah.
within an organization. When you said, as a leader, we people can only go as high as we are. I want to challenge that a little bit. And the
Okay.
reason I want to challenge that is it depends on what size of a company you're speaking about.
Yes.
If you're in a smaller nonprofit, let's just say they have 24 people, they don't have a bunch of layers.
Right.
There's not a bunch of layers of structure.
Hmm.
You'll have directors that report directly to the CEO for certain companies because they're smaller in
Right.
size. But then you may be a part of a larger organization that has maybe 4 or 5 levels of leadership: supervisor,
Hmm.
manager, senior manager, director, administrative director, VP, senior VP, right? So you may have different layers for growth from that perspective. So I think part of it has to do with the size of the company. Um,
Hmm.
the other part has to do with, I've seen leaders promote people above them, and that is, it doesn't happen a lot. It doesn't happen. But there have been times where there's certain leaders that are just very comfortable where they are. They may be at a point in their career, they're not chasing promotion. They're very comfortable. They're thinking about retirement in maybe 10 years. And what they want to do is still help other people succeed.
Hmm.
They really don't want to give up their role because they're comfortable in what they're doing, but they're willing to advocate for them, which is a
Right.
perfect segue into sponsorship. They're
Right.
willing to
Right.
advocate for them to go somewhere else within the company, right? And sometimes out of the company. And so I had it for me, specifically. And so I'll give you an example of that. But let's just talk about sponsorship and mentorship because it ties.
Well, real quick, Rob, before you move into that, because I think you and I are saying the same thing.
Mhm.
I don't want, so I agree with the challenge, and I appreciate you giving some more context to that. I think what I'm trying to articulate there is this idea that um you may have, right, and depending on whether you might be a chief or a director or whatever that looks like, and so you're a decision maker.
Mhm.
And when you're a decision maker and there's people that are under you that are living under the decisions that you make, that you have veto power, that when you have people under you who are trying to grow or trying to expand and you're constantly vetoing them, or you yourself don't know how to, step outside of comfort zone, or you don't embrace change, or you don't, right? Then it makes it really difficult for those people that are under you to be able to move past that. And so to your point, in a bigger organization, sometimes people just can go to a different department, go to a different leader, you know what I mean? Like, but they're going to move away from you. You're going to lose good people, whether that's on your team or whether that's in your organization, if you're not constantly that. So that's where I was
Yeah.
trying to kind of get to, which I think is what you're also
Well,
saying.
we share that. I agree with that. They have a thing the saying that goes, you go upward or onward. Right?
Right.
If I can't go upward, it's time to go onward. It's time.
Right.
A larger company, you can move on within. A
Right.
company, you may have to move on outside of the company. And it does happen. It
Yeah.
does. So I think that can be the case. Every person that has a leadership or managerial title doesn't mean they're a great leader. I mean, we have to understand. I mean, I've heard people talk about people don't leave jobs; they leave who they report to. I've
Absolutely.
heard different type of sayings, but there's some validity to that in certain situations. Um,
Yeah.
it also has to do back to self awareness, your ambitions, all the things you want to choose to do, and they sometimes a place is for a season. And
Yeah.
it just may not have what you need for you to continue to grow, which means you have to make a decision. It's not the fault of the organization. The organization is what it is and where it is at the
Absolutely.
moment. It's time for you to do something else. But you have to take ownership of that.
Right.
And you also have to take ownership of your development. Because
That,
you mentioned a
that's
style
good.
leader that I think is important. There are some really ambitious leaders.
Hmm.
Kind of hook yourself to that wagon.
Yeah.
As they move, you move.
Right. Right.
Seen that. I've seen
Right.
it, and that works until it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay, it works until it doesn't. But that's a different technique and strategy to kind of move up throughout a system. Is when that person continues to move, they will then say, okay, all right, I'm going here. Would you like to come?
Come with me.
Right,
Come
because
with.
they tend to have certain people that they gel well with,
Yeah.
and then the higher people go, they want to keep people around them they trust.
Uh,
So never forget this: the higher people go,
Trust becomes so important.
because there's more risks.
Right.
All right,
Right.
it's like the Game of Thrones.
Right.
Everybody wants to be the king or the queen. And once you get to a certain height in large organizations, it gets a little different. It's
Right.
territorial, talent
Uh-huh.
territorial, FTE count is territorial. So you have to understand something they call executive speech. And me and you can talk about that at a different time. But there's just so many nuances you learn as you tend to move up within an organization, how things function culturally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but then there's times where those leaders move up and they just create space
Yeah.
because they were the
Let me
manager,
get their land.
director, they leave the role open, which
Yeah.
then somebody can get into there. But
Yeah.
guess what? It's 10 of us, it's one spot.
Right.
Well, only one person gets the spot. Now, it
Right.
doesn't mean three people are not qualified for the spot, but there's only one spot. So sometimes we take it personal because we're not the one chosen for the spot.
Yeah.
And so we'll
But
feel type of way about that. Go ahead.
here's where sponsors can come into
Yeah,
that.
and so what does a sponsor do?
Yeah.
A sponsor is not somebody that meets with you regularly. What a
Uh-huh.
sponsor does is they put your name in a hat when you're not even around.
That
So
part.
they may have a project coming along that's a multi-million dollar project that they need somebody that has experience in something you particularly know. That person may say, hey, do you know Rob? You haven't met Rob? I think we should think about Rob may be a good person for that.
Uh-huh.
And then they just put your name in a hat.
Right.
Now, what are they doing when they put your name in a hat to be considered for supporting this work going on? What they're doing is loaning you their credibility.
Come on.
All right. It's
Come on.
like a credit card. They're
Yeah.
loaning you their credibility.
Yes.
their name has some authority to it, some weight to it.
Right.
So when they
Right.
say, "Hey, you should talk to this person," that resonates amongst the group
Right.
at the moment in time. Now,
Right.
they come to you to talk to you. How do you pay this person back? Because
Come on.
remember, they basically loaned you their credibility. And whenever you get a loan, you got to pay it back. Okay. So, how do you pay this individual back? You pay them back by delivering on the job when you get it. Okay. When you get it, you put your best foot forward. You do your best possible to make, because then you make them look good.
Rob, Rob, you are it is Sunday today, and you are preaching today, sir. For real, facts. This is so I'm I'm so glad that you gave this perspective of it too. Not just what a sponsor does for you, but what you do in return for a sponsor. That is so key because I cannot tell you quite honestly, this is what keeps people from being sponsors because they know that they have created such capital that their word and their reputation is literally on the line, and they are like want to maintain that. They can't be out here recommending just trash because then people be then they're like, well, we're not listening to you because the last 6 people you recommended all turned out to be like not great. So they need that whoever it is that they're sponsoring to really show up. That's the payback, and that is so important. I'm so glad that you mentioned from that perspective.
It's vital. It's vital
Oh
because
my God.
at their levels, they're judged by being able to identify talent,
Yes.
promote talent. Because when
Yes.
you're a leader, you're a senior leader, you're not doing the day-to-day work. You're not the
Right.
needs. You're thinking more visionary, right? You're trying to
Right.
operate at a different level. So to your point, it's key that you deliver on that sponsor's recommendation. But the thing becomes there's a step before that. Okay. The step before that, what a sponsor is, they have to know you would be interested in it anyway before they put your name in.
That
So
part.
so when people say, hey, it's all about who you know,
Uh-huh.
that's part of the truth. People leave out,
Uh-huh.
there's another part outside of who you know. The other part is, what do they know about you?
Right. Right.
Because you can know them and they know
Right.
their name, but they don't know anything about you.
Right.
If I don't know what your interest is and what your passions are and what your background is, how do I recommend you for anything?
Okay. That's
Because
the storytelling.
I don't know you. I know your name, but I don't know about you.
Right.
So when a person, so this is what I like to do. You got to have your elevator pitch. You got to have
Uh-huh.
an elevator pitch. You see an executive in an elevator. Hey, how you doing? They'll speak to you. They'll say things like, "What have you been up to?"
Right.
That's your or how are things going? The minute
Right.
how are things going, or what have you been up to? You got about 20 seconds. I need it
Get
rapid.
it in.
Hey, boom, I just finished school. I'm doing this, this, and this, and this is some of my interests. I'm looking for opportunities to get involved more in the organization. And then you just kind of leave it like that. Like you leave it open. They may say,
Right.
so what did you go to school for? Right.
Right.
And you might tell them what you went to school for, what you're passionate about. They'll say, oh, okay. And then they may go off and be in the meeting 2 weeks later, and somebody may say something that aligns with the conversation they just had with you in the elevator. They said, well, do you know Rob? Yeah, Rob works
Right.
in this department. I just spoke to him another day. I think he'll be interested in this. I think this is
Right.
really good for him.
Right. That's so good. That is so good. And once you pay off for one sponsor, if you will, that encourages other people to sponsor you as well.
which then
Right.
which then attracts mentoring
More sponsors.
and sponsorship. It attracts
Yep.
it
Yep.
because you're known to deliver on what you've been given.
Absolutely.
And so when they have this thing called the 3 keys to success in any type of career: credibility, which sometimes people have to loan you, right? Establish
Uh-huh.
credibility, competency, and confidence.
Yeah.
You need the 3 C's. Okay, you got to be
Yeah.
confident, competent, and have credibility. Some
Right.
people loan you their credibility because you haven't worked, you haven't developed the experience,
Right.
you haven't been there yet. So they
Right.
loan that to you. That's sponsorship. Mentorship is the one that comes along. Mentorship helps you with your confidence, right?
Yes.
They help you with competence. They'll start pointing you in directions and say, "Hey, read this, get in part of this." And they tend to be more hands-on. Sponsors
Right.
are as hands-on. They're more
Right.
loaning you credibility.
Right.
But mentors tend to be more hands-on.
Right.
They the
That's
ones
good.
that get more feedback. So it's just something to think about. Mentors may meet with you more frequently than a sponsor. A sponsor may meet with you once in a blue, but they know enough about you to be able to speak for you. And I've had some great sponsors as well as some great mentors.
And I have as well. I'm gonna just say that I think that um every really big thing that happened in my career along the way was really truly one. I was prepared, so I had been doing the work, had been doing the work consistently and all those different things, but I absolutely had sponsors. I absolutely had people saying, look at what she's doing, like this is amazing, like speaking up for me,
Mhm.
and speaking in rooms that I wasn't in, and in some cases, even inviting me into those rooms so that I could, to your point, story tell and speak for myself.
Right.
So yeah, it's huge. It's really really important to be able to have those. And if you are a person who has the ability to be a sponsor, it's so important that you show up in that space for other people too, right? Not just you worrying about yourself, but how can you advocate for other people? That's really important. Uh,
Which goes back to, because you mentioned capital, which we call
yeah.
social, right?
Uh-huh.
Social capital. Um,
Right.
to be a sponsor, you have to start to be able to identify talent,
Yeah.
be able to nurture
Yeah.
talent, but also be able to follow up on
Yeah.
too. And so, yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's back to nothing's free, right? You pay
Right.
now, later. It's the same thing. People have
Yeah.
sponsored me, mentored me. I'm passionate about doing the same for others. But there, it comes with some expectations for that to happen, and we need to be clear what those are with people.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about this again, an area that you helped me with, and this is negotiation. I think this is something that people really struggle with. My daughter actually called me and she said, "Oh, my yearly review's coming up, and they want to talk about raises, and so I don't know what to do." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "I'm just gonna take whatever they say." And I'm like, "What? No!" And so we we talked about some different things. Um, to go into what she should suggest for herself. But this is an area that you really helped me in. And so for people who are on the verge of negotiating their either their raise or, their salary period, what are some things that they should think about as they're going into that conversation to bring, realistic numbers, if you will, into the conversation?
Well, we'll talk about that. Let's talk about your daughter first, right?
Okay.
Because I think it's a good I think good examples help people solidify. Because when we talk about things, especially as from a place of experience, we speak from the familiar, and then we
Yeah.
speak in ways that's philosophical. But there's
Right.
nothing really to be able to hold on to as a true example of how it can be applied. All right.
Right.
I think for your daughter, that's a perfect example to apply some of what we're going to discuss.
Yeah.
Number, if she knows her yearly is coming up, I don't know if she works in an office setting or not. Let's just say you work in some form of where you sit at a desk or you have a computer.
She's in PR. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. All right.
Mhm.
Perfect. So when you're in a situation like that, there's something called a brag sheet. Okay. This is something
Okay.
up for my team. Basically, what it is a Word document that you put on your desktop that you can click into anytime. And what you do is you brag about yourself to yourself. Okay.
Okay.
What you do
Okay.
is if you've been a part of a project and that project had a good outcome, you put that down. If
Right.
we're able to fix a problem that was just put in your lap out the blue and you were able to resolve it, you write that down. What you
Right.
do throughout the whole year, you write down things that you want to identify as brag points for yourself. Why do you do that? You do that because you will forget all the things you've done throughout the year by the time you sit down for your yearly. You're going to
Right.
forget what you did in
Right.
January of 2024 or whatever. Like you're going to forget that. So,
Yeah.
so part of it, what it does is it gets you familiar with you. Okay.
Right.
Back to self awareness. Okay. If you can't identify the things you're doing throughout the year, how can you expect that manager that probably has other people reporting to them for
Right.
them to remember what you did 12 months ago? That's not
Right.
that. See, we have to take accountability of not only our performance but of recognition for our performance.
That part.
And then part
Yeah.
of the way you do that is you put a little brag sheet. Again, simple Word document, ain't nothing fancy. 12 times Roman if you want to, if you need to know the size you want to use, whatever works. Uh, and then you just start to put number one, I did this. And what you do is you put what the example is and you put the date. On
Okay.
this date, I did this. Boom, on this date, I did that. So then because the way the organization I used to work at used to do years ago was we used to have to write our own performance review and then
Right.
leader would then review what we wrote about ourselves.
Right,
So this is
right.
where I learned that technique from, that I even tell all the people I work with now, I tell them the same thing.
Yeah.
And the way I used to do it was I bought a book. Matter of fact, I'm gonna show you the book.
Okay.
This is the secret weapon.
Okay. The secret
Right.
weapon.
See,
We
one
ready.
of my secret. I got a couple secret weapons. This is one of my secret weapons. This is perfect phrases for performance reviews. And
Okay.
what this book does is it gives you hundreds of words you can use in how you
Okay.
formulate your performance review. Right.
Okay.
If you want to be outstanding, it gives you phrases to use. So if you're a manager, it could be useful as well. So I bought
Okay.
this book, and what I would do is write my own performance reviews using some of the phrases from this book. And I used to hand it in, and my manager would be like, "Man, this is well written." He said, "This is well written." You know what? I agree. I agree. I agree. If he had questions about something I put in there, he would say, "Well, I don't remember this." And what I would do is go to my brag sheet. Well, in August of this, I did this, and it was based upon that you gave me as an opportunity to correct
That's good.
something. He'll say,
Yeah.
"I remember that. I agree." And then he would go, "I agree. I agree. I agree." And so I would. So two things are happening. Number one, I'm writing my performance review, but I'm also learning how to write performance review.
Right. Right.
And I'm demonstrating that to a manager that would be the one to then help me ascend,
There
right?
it is.
So I
Yeah.
made his life easier. He had 30, 35 people to write for each year. So
Right.
if I did mine in a way he thought was good enough for him to pass it off and say, okay, I agree, that's one less he had to write.
Right. Right.
So
And this
you
is
actually,
good, but this is
right.
this is good towards money. You
Yeah.
also showing your value in this
Well,
way
well,
too.
hold on. There were three levels.
Okay.
I put, because you had below standards, you had key contributor, and then you had role model. Well, you know,
Okay.
when I'm writing mine with examples, I'm writing role model. Yeah, I'm writing top performer. Now you got to bring me down with it. You know what I mean? I'm going to give you. I'm going because I'm using supporting examples as well, right? I'm
Right.
using supporting examples, so it's not like I'm just saying it with no support.
Right.
I'm picking the highest rating in areas, and I'm putting details to support. Where do the details come from? Your brag sheet
Right.
of things
Right.
they've worked on, who assigned it to you, what the date was, and what the outcome was.
Right.
And that way, you're able to have some type of documentation support why you feel you deserve certain things from a performance perspective.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now
This is
that right, so that's being on one side where you're actually having your review done.
right.
When you're one doing the review to the person, right? What the people don't understand is sometimes you're limited to how much money you even have in the budget to give anyway.
Okay.
So you may have done super well the year before and got, or let's just say you were in the middle the year before and you got a 3% raise,
Uh-huh.
but yet you're a star performer this year and you only get a 3% raise. You might say, well, I'm a star performer. Why I only get 3%? Well, budgetary wise, the money we were allotted as a department doesn't allow
Okay.
for me to give you more because you have
Right.
other people that are working that the money needs to be split between. So I just
Right.
think those are nuances people don't think about. Don't get caught
Right.
up in just the number. Just understand that sometimes the number they're giving one year is not the same number they're giving the next year to give out, right?
That's good.
It's
That's
not
good.
always the same. So that's one
Right.
nuance that I had to be on the other side to see that, wow,
Right.
okay,
Right.
it's not always contingent upon how good I perform. Sometimes it's also contingent upon how much money they're given to spread across the department as a
Right.
whole. Okay.
Right.
All right, so that's one thing. The other thing I think would be good for your daughter is she can do that start next year. She's already here now, and it sounds like. So,
Right.
if I'm already here, my thing is once she hears the feedback from who she reports to,
Mhm.
and they tell her where she stands as far as performance goes, it would behoove her to ask questions about how she can be better.
Okay.
All right. If you tell me, hey, Rob, you did well here, I'm gonna say, well, how can I do better there? Oh,
Okay.
her conversation is not
Right.
trying to justify that she's not good enough. She's trying to justify how
Mm.
can she get better. Why do you
Yeah.
do that? Why do you focus on how you can get better? Because that makes it a conversation that's positive. See,
Right.
if
Right.
you go in there trying to defend and say, well, why you say that? I'm better than that. I did this. See, now it becomes a more of you trying to get them
Combative.
right. If you come
Yeah.
in there and they say, okay, this is where you were, and you might say, well, I also did this, this, and this, right? But then you
Mhm.
can say, well, how can I be better from your perspective? Because
Right.
sometimes as a leader, they say it different than the way you see it. Right.
Right. Right.
And they got a saying. Jim Collins wrote a book called From Good to Great. He wrote a book. Jim Collins, Good to Great. All leaders, good to great. Read that book.
Yeah.
What does it say? That book. Good is the enemy of great.
Yeah.
If you're only striving to be good, you'll never be great.
You'll never be great.
And what I mean by that, if you're an employee and you're only striving to do just enough to be good, you will never be great. I'm just telling
Never
you.
be great. Right. Right.
Mediocrity is not something you strive for.
Some people do, but we're
No,
not
no,
talking
no.
about that. We're
Listen,
not talking about those people. That's not.
if that's what they choose to do when you get your performance review, don't expect the maximum raise. If you're striving to be mediocre,
That's what you're gonna get.
you're
It's
gonna get
mediocrity.
mediocre.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what you're
yeah.
gonna
So,
get.
so,
Yeah.
so you don't want to strive to be good. You want to strive to be great.
Right.
And
And
just
that
because you strive to be great, don't mean you're going to ever get greatness, but you'll get beyond good.
right.
You'll get beyond good. Because if my target is good and I fall short of good, I'm not even good.
Right.
If my target is great and I fall short of great, at least I
At
know
least
I'm
I'm
beyond
good.
good.
At
Yeah.
least I'm good.
Listen, at least I'm good. So we just got to think about what we're striving for.
Right. Right.
And if we're in any role and we're only striving to be good at it, I mean, to me, that's mediocre. So if you're on my team, I'm speaking from a leader. If you're on my team and you do just enough to get by, you can't expect me to want to put you in for top tier performance raises. Why
Right.
would I do that?
Right.
Because now I'm encouraging that behavior. That's
Right.
not what I want to encourage.
Okay, you know what? See, that's good too. That's good too. That's good because people, again, we sometimes people look in a very
Mhm.
limited viewpoint, and that is good. Raises and those kinds of things are also rewards, and they encourage behavior, and they encourage people, not only you but the people around.
Mhm.
And if I'm giving you raises when you doing just the bare minimum, then I'm telling you that just the bare minimum is exactly what we want on this team, which,
Well, you may get a raise, but it
yeah,
won't be the raise that you may
that
think
you
you
could
can
have
get.
gotten.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody will get something because you've done your job. I'm
Right.
not saying doing your job is bad. No, you've done your job.
Right.
You will get something for doing your job, but when you go beyond that,
But is that
that's good.
okay? So to be fair, Rob, is that a raise or is that like cost of living? I just want to give.
Great question. Because
Okay.
people use them interchangeably, and they're
Right.
not the same thing.
Right.
All right, people use them interchangeably.
Right.
Um, Pay for performance is solely looking at your performance.
Mhm.
Cost of living is, hey, inflation is this.
Right.
We're giving this out for everybody. Everybody gets this, as long as
Right.
they're within standards.
Right. Right.
Not if they're superstars. If they're within standards,
Right.
they get this.
Right.
But as a leader, you get a chance to look at performance and make adjustments.
Right. So we want more than cost of living
If we can get it, let's get it.
if we can. If
If
we
we
can
can
get it.
get it, if it's available, if the dollars are available. For me,
Right.
just imagine this, right? Let's just say an organization says, hey, it's a challenging time. We're giving 2.5% across the board. And it's 2% of what you make. So if one person makes $20 an hour, another person makes $40 an hour, it's still 2.5% of that.
Right.
Okay. Which then one that does $40 an hour actually ends up getting more.
Right.
Okay. Still 2.5%, but more, which means they're growing at a faster rate. This person never really catches up
Right.
because 2.5 is not the same across the two, but they can be doing the same exact role. That now we start to talk about pay equity.
Right.
Right. And pay equity is a whole nother challenge. And we don't have to go down that path. But as a leader, you have to factor that in too. You want to think about pay equity, not just gender, age, all of that experience. You want to think about that. So anyway, some of that has to be factored in during the raise time. So
Mhm.
again, as an employee, that's an individual contributor, I'm not thinking about all the nuances that play a part of these raises that come all across the institution, but it's bigger than just me and what I've done. It's how much money has been allotted. It's what does pay equity look like within the department? It's
Mhm.
other dynamics that as a leader they have to think about beyond just what how well you've done.
Right. Right.
So again, it's hard for us to see that when it's us because it's like, oh,
Mhm.
it impacts me. I'm
Right.
the one experiencing this. Um, but sometimes you may come in and be making more than the person that sits right next to you.
That's true. This is
But you
true.
don't y'all don't talk about it. You know, it's just
Right.
not like to do that, right? Which is fine.
Right.
So when you find out that they got a 3% raise and you got a 2.5% raise, will you then be upset that because they may tell you how much raise they got, but not how much money they make?
Right.
So they tell you 3%, and then you like, well, hold on, I only got 2.5, and then what we'll do is get in our feelings, not realizing, well, you already make 10,000 more than them a year. So
Right.
that point
Right.
5% they got is to try to help with some pay equity.
Right.
It's not
Close
really.
the gap. That's good. That's
You
good.
see,
Yeah,
that's
that's
another
good.
nuance that people just don't think about
Yeah.
when it comes to that. Because as a leader, you want to be fair.
Right.
All right.
Right.
If 3% for this person is really what 2.5% is for this person, so they really get the same amount of money increase,
Yeah.
but if the
Yeah.
percentages are different because they make different hourly rates, people
Right.
don't understand all those nuances.
That's good. That's
So you
really
want
good.
to think about that. You want to factor that in. But again, even still, advocate for yourself. Make sure you keep a brag sheet. Make sure you can speak to the things you've done very, very well. And if there are
Yeah.
things that you have not done well, you want to ask who you report to, hey, what else could I do to be better?
Can
What
I
else?
ask
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was gonna ask you one more thing with that. What
Hmm.
about, you hear about things like the market value for your job.
Hmm.
And so how much of that plays into what you should consider both for a raise, but also coming into, trying to negotiate for a position? Is it worth looking around, like, what is everyone else with my level of experience doing this role? What are they making in this city? Like, is that worth it, or is that not really,
Excuse me.
does
I
that not
think
really matter?
I think that's worth it if you're coming into the job. Most of your money is made through when you start a job. Your negotiation taking
Okay.
the job is where most of your money is kind of established. Then you get incremental raises over time, unless you get promoted.
Right.
Promotions tend to be more
Right.
leaps, but yearly increases tend to be more incremental, and so you tend to negotiate most of your money in the front. Okay.
Okay.
Uh, so in that situation, if you're taking a role and you're applying for a role, you interview for a role, and they say to you, "Hey, we want to make you the offer." If I'm you, before they even want to make me an offer, I've already got on Glassdoor and some of
Right.
these other pay scale websites to kind of get a sense of what the pay scale is for a role similar
Okay.
to the role I'm applying for.
Right.
If I know someone within an institution, I may be asking them, hey, they may not want to tell me exactly what they make, but what's the range? Can you give me a
Right.
range that they
Right.
have? If I know somebody that works at a job, a lot of jobs, when they promote their jobs internally, they tell you the scale.
Right.
Externally, when you look at it from the external website, you won't see it. So if I know
Right.
somebody there, I'm like, hey, I seen a position. This is it. Are you able to see what the scale is? What
Okay.
that does is it gives you the range,
Right. Right.
right? So now you kind of know you don't want to undershoot yourself, but you also don't want to overshoot yourself to where it's unrealistic, right?
Right. Right.
So that's always a technique you can use. Glassdoor, pay scale, call somebody from the company, see if they can see for they may not even work in the department, but they can see the scale for the job on the
Yeah.
internal website. Okay.
Yeah.
That's another technique you can use. And then what you could do is sometimes you have to look outside of the state. All right.
Okay.
Now, when you're looking outside of the state, you have to factor in cost of living.
Hmm.
So if they pull data for you and say, okay, in Memphis, this role makes this, don't just use that number. You have to use cost of living because New York will pay different than
Right.
what Memphis is going to pay.
Right.
And if your job is in New York, but you're looking at a Memphis pay scale, you may be undershooting yourself. Okay.
Completely.
So I'm just saying, don't just pick a number and not understand
Right.
locality. Okay,
Right.
the cost of living. So you
Right.
may be able to put in your search Delaware, looking for a position in Delaware, or looking for a position in Philadelphia, or metropolitan, like
Right.
whatever the DMV. You can pick a space you're looking for that role with that salary in that domain.
Okay.
Don't get caught up and have a job from Alabama, and I'm just saying, and you use that as the pay scale that you're asking for where you're located,
You're gonna be
because
mad about it.
they may say absolutely you can get that job. Yeah, absolutely, we'll pay you that. Now, so that's one thing. That's what I would do. The other thing I
Yeah.
would keep in mind is you don't want to be at the top of any scale unless you feel like you meet that to the T, meaning
Mm,
you have the experience, you have the competence, you have value add that you know you're bringing, you have social capital, you have a network, you're bringing this to the role. Then yeah, you may start to lean towards the top if you
yeah.
feel like you add that much value. But back to self awareness. Don't think you are at the top of a scale and you know you're I mean come on, you know you're not.
Right.
So because you asked about negotiations,
Yeah. Right.
So
Right.
let's just say I apply for a role. Somebody called me and said, "Hey, Rob, I want to." You know what? Let's not make that up. Let's use something very accurate. Okay. So at one point in time, I was being recruited to a role in Houston. Okay,
Okay.
this was many years ago. It was when I was in biomedical engineering. I was being recruited. When they reached out to me, um, they said, "Hey, we got your name from someone else." Here we go again. Network, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, gave him the name. I said, "Oh, okay, I know him. Let's talk about it." So we start talking. Hey, this is what we do. There were a smaller company based out of
Uh-huh.
Houston, had a couple locations throughout the United States, and they were looking for a director to roll out new locations and build teams they wanted to grow the business, and they looking for somebody to be a director to help grow that business.
Right.
Okay, from an engineering perspective. I
Right.
said, okay. Before we got in the conversation, I said, well, what range are we looking for? What range are we looking at?
Right.
Because I wanted to know if it was even worth continuing the conversation for
Fair.
him as well as me. He was the chief operating officer at the time, and he was calling me to ask me this question. But see, now we're talking about leverage. If somebody calls you, you have some leverage.
Different thing.
That's why I like to use use examples people can make tangible. You can ask them, hey, so what are we thinking about? What range? You don't have to know the
Right.
exact amount because you don't know everything. You might ask for some more. You don't know. You
Right.
just want to know what they're thinking. So what range are we thinking about here for this
Right.
this particular role? Oh, this role would be a six-figure role. Okay, well, let's talk.
Right.
That's all I need to know. Six-figure role. Okay, well, let's talk. Because if it was in a number I just knew I couldn't do, then why am I not making good use of his time or my time? So we continued the conversation. We had a conversation. He asked me some questions. I told him what my thought processes were around the business of engineering and some of the things I wanted to be able to do that I wasn't currently able to do, meaning from broadening out and treating it more like a business than
Yeah.
just the service aspect of it. So he said, "Oh, that's really great." He said, "Would you mind coming out to Houston?" I said, "When?" He said, "Tomorrow." I said, "Tomorrow?" He said, "Tomorrow."
He said immediately.
Tomorrow. Sent me a ticket to go to Houston,
Wow.
first class, but it's really business class, right? Now I'm gonna
Mhm.
now I'm gonna tell myself. So I had never traveled business before, right? So I get on the plane to go the next day, and I bring my own snacks on. You know, you get in the airport, you get your snacks, right? You eat your snacks. And I'm sitting next to this gentleman. I'll tell you how old he is. He got a newspaper. He's sitting there. He got some cognac. You know, they're pouring him some cognac, and I'm sitting there like, wow, right? Then he looked at me. This is what he said to me. This must be your first time. I said, I didn't know why he said it.
Saw them
And
snacks.
I didn't know why he said it. And then he laughed. He said, "Man, they give you all this for free." I said, "Alcohol too?" He said, "They give you everything for free up here." I said, "Oh, I had never been up there." So learning experience. I
Learning
learned what it's like to be
experience.
in business. I said,
Yeah.
okay. But when I look at the tickets on them price, I'm like, nah, I'm not paying for that. But anyway, but I say that to say that was my experience. I flew down there one day. I flew the next morning. I met with them, interviewed with I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 executives, and I flew home that same day. So they
Right.
flew me down, flew me back. I said, man. So then I started realizing what's possible. See,
Right.
because we don't even realize stuff like that is possible. That happens.
Right.
I'm back
Right.
at work. I'm back at work. The day after that, nothing ever happened.
Right.
Nothing ever happened. Flew you down one night. You met the next day. You flew back that same day. I'm back at work. I only missed one day at work.
Right.
So anyway, come back. I meet with them, and then they say, "Well, we really enjoyed meeting with you. We want to pull together. We want to have some conversations."
Right.
So they had some conversations. Thing went quiet for a while. And the reason I'm saying this to people is to understand that when you're going for certain level roles, it takes time. It's not just one conversation that's a part of your negotiation.
That's
One
good.
conversation is not just everything for your negotiation. Your negotiation evolves over time,
Right. Right.
depending on what level you're at. If you're trying to get an entry level role, maybe it's just one conversation. Hey, this is what we're paying. Do you accept? Like it may be something very cut and dry, and you have to make a decision, yay or nay. The
Right.
reason they can do that is because they have other people lined up that can take those roles very easily.
Right.
So if you don't want to take the money, somebody else will. So it may not be a ton of a negotiation at that moment in time, but once you start to evolve, and you start to be in roles and you're bringing about some intangible experiences and they're all in one person, right?
Right.
You've been in different roles in different places, so you bring a unique skill set.
Right.
People can
Right.
identify that unique skill set and say, hey man, if we can get that, we can do some things.
Mhm.
So then the conversation went on. It took 6 months. These are different conversations. Then they flew me down for the Christmas party. And
Okay.
at the time, at the time, when they talked to me, I had told them, because I was seeing somebody at the time, and I told them, I said, if she doesn't come, I'm not coming. I'm not recommending people do that. I'm not because what I don't want to do is, the story is just the story. This is not saying advice. I'm just saying I want people to be able to make it
You sound
tangible.
just laying it out there. I'm just laying
Because
it
because the reason I'm laying it out there is because it's a part of the negotiation.
out. Okay, that's
See?
fair.
You
That's
gotta
fair.
understand all the pieces of the negotiation.
Yeah.
Negotiation is just not money. It's
Right.
not just money. It's
Right.
more to that. Your
Right.
compensation is a package.
Right.
It's not just a dollar amount of base salary. There's so much more. So I'm trying to walk them through it. So I said, well, if she doesn't come, I'm not coming.
Right.
I mean, we're serious. We're moving in a certain direction. I'm already working.
I mean, it's
I was
Christmas too.
I,
It's Christmas. It's the
listen, I was
holidays.
already happy where I was, right?
Right.
These things that happened. So through our conversations, the Christmas party came up, and they said, well, we want her to come.
Okay.
So they flew me and her, right? Took
Right.
us to wined her and dined her, took her
Right.
all type of. She was excited. She said, "Oh, this is me." I didn't even know they do this, right? Because again, I've always applied for a job just for me. I never realized that they will try to, um,
Went over the family. Went over
yes,
everybody. Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. Because
Yeah.
they know because I told them she's a part of the deal. If I
Right.
do this, she has to come. So you know what they started to do? So what do you do for work? And what do you like to do? They started thinking about placement for her,
Yeah. That's good.
career wise. I was like,
Right.
I said, oh, they're serious. In my mind, I said, oh, they're serious.
They're serious.
They're serious. So
Yeah.
guess what? This is not just about a dollar for me.
Right.
I can't just go into it trying to get the most money I can get,
Right.
because they're thinking about all aspects of my life, meaning my personal life,
Right. Right.
my work life, right? I said, oh, this is okay. This is different. So as
Right.
I'm going through this process, I'm calling my mentors. Hey, this is where I am. This is what they're telling me. They said to me, what? Because they talked about how much you can contribute to your retirement account. This is something else I learned. So yes,
Mhm.
you can make more money, but if
This
you
part is good. Go
this is
ahead,
what I'm
Rob.
saying. This is what I'm
This is
talking about.
good. This is
So
good.
then they start talking about, well, how much money you make. I had to factor in, well, how much can I contribute to my retirement?
Mhm.
Because you can make more, but you pay more in taxes, and you might end
Right.
up making less.
Right.
Because remember, you're in a whole
Benefits
nother.
too.
You're
Benefits too.
this is what I'm saying. There's more to the package when you're
Yes.
negotiating. So when they start talking about that, I said, well, how much can I max out? This is me. Can I max out my contributions? They said no. I said, why not? Now, I kind of knew a little bit of this, but I wanted to see how much they were going to be forthcoming. They
Right.
said, well, we don't have enough people on our staff contributing to the 401k.
Ah, got you.
So since we don't have enough of them contributing, leadership can only contribute a certain amount, because you have to have enough participation
Yep.
at your front line level to even be able to max on your level.
Right.
So
Right.
then what did that help me understand? Okay, so does their staff feel like they make enough to contribute to this? Or are they
Yeah.
aware of it? What kind of education? Again, I'm gonna join a company. I need to understand what's going on. So I said,
Right.
okay, so I can't take full advantage of the retirement account, but I'm making more money, which means I'm now paying more taxes.
Right.
Okay, because I can't put it away before taxes. 401k goes in before tax. I
Right.
can't use that as a way to do a tax shelter.
Right.
I said, okay. So then that means that impacts compound interest for my retirement over years.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All
So
right.
that means I got to offset that now with dollars after taxes.
Right.
So now I'm thinking about, from an investment perspective, what does that mean? All right. So then we go through that piece. Then after we do Christmas, they then waited another 3 months to then
Okay.
make an offer. So this now went out about 9 months. This is 9 months.
Okay. Right.
They make the offer, but when they make the offer, it's less than six figures. It was like, I don't know, something like 90,000 or something.
Yeah.
And I got quiet. I didn't say anything. I was silent. They said to me, because of they call it a pregnant pause,
Right. Right.
right? People don't like pauses. It makes people uncomfortable. So I purposely
Right.
didn't say anything. I was quiet. He spoke first. He said, well, how are you feeling about that? I said, I feel like that's a little less than what we initially discussed. my understanding is we'll be in a six-figure range.
Right.
He said, but this would be a great opportunity for you. This would be this would be that. He kind of gave me his sales pitch, right?
Right.
Which I respect it because this is all, and that's another
This is
thing about
negotiation.
negotiation. It's not personal.
That's good too.
People come into it and take it personal. Negotiation
Right.
is not personal.
It's not.
This is business, and you
This
should
is
want them to want to be an
business.
advocate for themselves, and you should want to be an advocate for yourself. But you
Right.
have to know what social capital you bring to this role. Like, what are you bringing, so you can know
Right.
where you fall. So
Right.
all I was asking for was for him to honor what his original comment was to me. I wasn't saying, "Oh, I want to be at this number." That I said, "Well, that's a little short from what we
Right.
discussed." So then he said, "Well, the bonus is 30%. You hit the bonus, you get 30% on top of your base." So then that brings me into the six-figure range. I said, "Oh, okay." But this is another trick you have to pay
Yeah.
attention to. I said, well, how many people have actually hit the bonus?
Good. Good question. Good
What is the
question.
what is the bonus achievement rate? How many people have actually done this?
Right.
Because you can dangle 30% over in front of me, but if nobody's reaching 30%, I don't get it. I'm gonna be stuck with the base.
Right.
So I need to know how achievable is this and how often is it hit?
Right.
Oh well, yeah, I don't know. He couldn't really give me those numbers, right? Which is okay. Again, it's all he didn't expect that question from me.
Right. He
See,
wasn't
he
prepared.
expected to dangle to 30%, and he expected me to say, okay, that works, and kind of move forward. Can you give
Right.
me an idea of what the metrics would be that I would need to achieve? Because I'm assuming the role exists and the expectations already exist. If you're telling me 30% exists, what would I have to hit? What metrics would have to be met? What
For me to
KPIs would
get
have to be
there.
met? At what level for me to achieve that? And then is it all or nothing? Or are you telling me I can get up
Up to.
to 30%? I
That's
just need to
good too.
clarify. I need
That's
to
good.
clarify. Are we saying I can fall 15, 20,
Right.
5?
Right.
I mean, what are
Right.
we saying? Because now I need to understand how structured they are.
Right.
Because if you throw me a number, but you or not have thought out what this means, then I'm negotiating a little differently than if you lay it out to me and say, listen, these are the metrics, these are the different levels. This is threshold, this is target, this is stretch. If you hit threshold, you get this. If you hit targets, you get this. If you hit
Right.
stretch goals, you get this. The max you can get is 30. The least amount you can get is 0. But as long as you hit your threshold, you'll walk away with a minimum of, let's just say, 15%. Oh,
Right.
okay. Oh,
Right.
okay. Because now I understand what the bottom is
Right.
and I
Right.
understand what the top is. So
Right.
again, all a part of negotiation. All right.
Right.
So once we had that conversation, I said, "Oh, okay, that sounds fair. That sounds fair to me." I said, do you have a what was it? CFO?" I said, "Can I speak to the CFO?" Because
Mm.
at this role, I would have been reporting to the COO. COO reports to the owner. Owner operated CEO.
Yeah.
So I'm one level away from the CEO. So my
Right.
thing is, as a COO, you have a partner who's your CFO.
Right.
Can I speak to the CFO? And he said, well, why would you want to do that? I said, because I will report to you, but financially, I want to understand what financial requirements I need to make. What is my budget for this year? Meaning that I have to oversee. And I
Right.
want to understand from him how he functions. Because you could be in a role, again, depending on what level you're at. I was at a different level to be able to ask these questions. I'm
Right.
inquiring about things that I would have to be responsible for and
Right.
oversee and
Right.
make decisions on.
Right.
So that's why I was asking those questions. And when I found out that the CFO, they just got a brand new one. At 9 months ago, they had told me they just had got a brand new one. So it's a brand new one and another brand new one. To me, that was a flag. Okay, if you got
Right.
two CFOs in 9 months,
What's going on here?
I need to think about this a little bit more.
Right. Right. What's
Right.
going on?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that level, that's the person that handles the money.
Right.
And if the
Right.
person that
That's a
handles the
big
money is
deal.
not consistent, I need
That's
to
a big
understand
deal.
what's happening. Right. So I say all that to say those are some of the things you want to think about. Um, it's an interesting process. I would say go into it not taking things personal. If you know the scale, they have something called anchoring for negotiation. It's called anchoring. So when the guy told me the 90,000 or whatever he said initially for base, he was trying to anchor me on that number so I wouldn't go too far beyond that. So if you
Gotcha.
say 90 and I asked for 100, you would have probably paid 100 anyway. But
Right.
but if you would have said 100 and I said 115, now I'm starting to drift. So
Right.
what you do in negotiation is you anchor a person where you kind of want them to play within.
Okay. Gotcha.
It's called anchoring. You give
Yeah.
a price, and then they don't stray. People's personalities, they don't tend to stray too far from
From.
where they're anchored from.
Yeah.
So understand that that's a technique for negotiation called
Yeah.
anchoring. It
Yeah.
happens a lot. right? So when I hire people and I was hiring people, I would already know if I was going to pay them more. I may not tell them exactly what I'm giving. I may not give them the max because I know they may want to negotiate. So what
Right.
I tend to
Right.
do is I'll give them a number. I'll anchor them on a number, and I'll look for them to give me some type of
Kind of swing a
feedback.
little bit.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Now, if they want to swing 5%, 6%, 10%, as long as it's within range, I may
Yeah.
swing a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, but it also depended on what they were bringing to the table. You
Yeah.
have to understand what you're bringing to the table. If you're bringing a unique skill set that is not readily available, then you have a little more leverage when you're
Right.
negotiating.
Right.
If
Right.
you're moving from a whole nother state and let's just say you're in radiology and they were uh, a neuroradiologist that had a unique skill set. Well, there may not be a ton of them available right now. I
Right.
may have to pay this person a little bit more
Right. Right.
than I'm
Supply
going to
and
pay. Than
demand.
to pay
Supply
somebody
and
that
demand.
does general, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just understanding that, and so that's why it's important to continue to build your skill set because the
Yeah.
more you add to your skill set, the more you're able to offer when it comes to opportunities. All right.
Right.
If somebody says to you, "Hey, this is our range," you don't go for the bottom of the range. You don't anchor yourself at the bottom of the range. You
Right.
don't do that.
It's gonna
You
be
know,
hard to keep. They're like, well, we know you was willing to take this.
right?
So
If they say the range is 70 to 90, and you say, "All right," and then they say 70. I mean, some people say, "Well, I'm not. I'm in the range."
right. Right.
Again, it depends on where you are. It depends
Right.
on where you're on your journey, and it depends on where you've been.
Yeah.
Because if where you're leaving was 50 and they say 70 to you, you're like, listen, I don't care if I'm at the bottom of the range. This is 20,000 more than where
That's
I
where
am.
I was.
You see what
Right.
I mean? So you
Right.
always need context.
Right.
Am I unemployed or am I employed? Is this
Right.
something I have to take today or not? Am I
Right.
happy where I am or not? That's all a part of your negotiation because you have to be willing to walk away.
Yeah. It's always good to not have to be negotiating from a place of desperation.
This is what I'm saying. Because is that really a negotiation? It's not
It's
really a
not.
negotiation. It's not. It's not. I mean, because you really are not in a position to walk away.
Right.
So
Right.
no matter
It's
what
to
they
be able
say,
to
you
say
can say, "Oh,
no.
I want this." They're gonna say, "Well, I'm only gonna give you that." You say, "Okay, I'll take it."
I,
Well, I mean, at that point, it's like, all right, you know,
we're not
they'll know when they tried.
negotiating.
They'll say the person tried. They tried.
they,
You know,
they tried it. I don't
they
know if
tried.
they
They
tried,
tried.
but they
Yeah, yeah,
tried it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
um, so I have this has been such a good conversation, Rob. I'm gonna have to have you back because even the things that you're talking about, like there's so much more
Mhm,
to it, and there's so much, you know what I mean, to branch out from that. I hope that you'll be willing to come back.
mhm,
But you just drop so much just jewels, just information and knowledge, like I said, even for myself. But I do have one more question before we kind of, wrap this with a bow and close it out. And that's this idea about really sort of perspective. So this is a broad question, and
mhm,
I'm gonna say it before you say it, right?
mhm,
It's a broad question because I think it plays into not only the workspace, not only in negotiation, it plays into relationships, it plays into every area of life, right? And there's this idea of value. And quite honestly, okay, because here's where there's this crossover. We are in this place of calling people high value. This is a high value man. This is a high
mhm,
value woman. And that's very much to do with like how much money they make, and you know what I mean. So there's this crossover that happens with this. And so how that person values themselves versus how other people may value them, right? Yeah, and you and I kind of have a conversation about this. I know my value, and I'm going to show you my full value once you do X, Y, and Z. So I need you to see my value before you actually see my value. Does that make sense? I'm
mhm.
amazing. I know I'm valuable. I'm fantastic.
Okay, I agree.
I'm gonna need you
I
to
agree.
you see what I'm saying? I'm gonna need
Yeah,
you to take my word for it. I'm gonna need you to
yeah,
take my word for it because before I actually show you that value, I'm gonna need you to prove
mhm,
something. I'm gonna need
mhm,
you to acknowledge. I'm gonna need you, right? I'm gonna need you to do certain things before I actually step into the value that I'm saying that I have.
right.
But I'm calling myself high value.
Yeah.
or the world is calling me high value, right?
Yeah.
So how how do we move away? Do we even need to move away from those kind of interactions?
Yeah. I think
Um,
from a relationship perspective. Okay, go ahead. You talking about from a
I
relationship?
think this goes across like all the,
Okay.
but yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. You said so. How do we
Oh,
move
no,
away?
no,
I
no.
don't want
So,
to. I don't want to cut you short. I want to
yeah.
make sure. Question.
Okay. So one, do we even need to move away, or is
Okay.
that wisdom? Is it
Okay.
smart to do that?
Okay.
Right. And again, like I said, I think that this has context in every place, because even in the workplace, you find people with that same perspective.
Hmm.
You got to pay me, and then I'll do X, Y, and Z. Right? Like we see this mindset
Hmm.
everywhere, not
Okay.
just at work, but we see it in
Hmm.
relationships too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is that appropriate?
Yeah.
Like, should we be behaving that way,
Yeah.
or is
Well,
that actually?
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I
I
was
was
gonna
just
say, or
going
is
to.
that actually counterproductive?
Well, I think you just gave a good example because examples help me solidify my perspective.
Okay.
If we talk about from a work perspective, because we've been talking about mentorship, sponsorship, all this
Mhm.
stuff. There are times where people say, "Well, I don't get paid enough for that. I'm not doing that. They don't give me
Right.
enough." Or if they give me this, then I'll do this. Or if they give me that, I'll do that. A lot of times, because I think it ties into what you're saying, a lot of times you don't do it for the job you're in, you're doing it for the job you want. Okay. You're doing extra not for where you are, you're doing for extra for where you want to be.
Right.
Okay. So,
Right.
so when I me and you talking now, the reason we're talking now is because of things we've already done. What
Right.
what we've done has got us here. Whether you reached out to me, whatever we talked about, like the what we've done in the past has got us to where we are. What we do
Right.
today will dictate where we're going to be.
Right.
Most people are saying, "Well, I'm not going to do it today unless I have a guarantee of what's going to be tomorrow," which goes
Right.
back to what we were initially saying. And it goes back for jobs. It goes in any relation. A job is a relationship, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a relationship. And so at
Right.
the end of the day, jobs use us to get a job done. We use a job for compensation. I don't think it's a problem using each other. Even in relationships and friendships, there's not a problem using each other. The problem becomes when we misuse each other, not when we
Okay.
use each other. It's the misuse of each other is where that becomes a problem for me, right? What they say, friends depend on friends, okay?
Right.
Jobs depend on employees.
Right.
Employees depend on jobs, right? Nothing's wrong with using each other. It's when we misuse each other. So
Right.
when I'm thinking about me growing and evolving as a man, as a leader, as a brother, right? As an uncle, like all the things, because I'm a lot of things. I'm not
Right.
just one thing, right? And so once I understand that, I may have to go ahead and stretch and do some things. So
Mm.
people ask me, "Hey, Rob, how you living?" I said, "I'm living at the edge of my capacity." They said,
Okay.
"Capacity? Yeah, I'm living on the edge, the edge of my capacity," which then ties in back to my capacity to love, right? When you're living on the edge, because I'm gonna sum it all up. When you're living on the edge, you're living at a point where you're not comfortable, like you're expanding, you're challenging
Mm.
yourself to experience things that you have not experienced. You're challenging yourself to look at things another way. You're constantly becoming when you're living on the edge.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I feel like if you're in any role, you can live on that edge of that role of a husband or a wife, or like you can live on the edge of that role where you're stretching yourself to be more,
Right. Right.
right? To
That's
be
good.
more. It's
That's
not
good.
to say that you're less, but what we're saying is you can always add to who you
Can
are.
always get better.
You evolve, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so you can either have evolution or you will have revolution. What does revolution mean? When things become conflict. Evolution is to evolve because where we are in the state of the world is different. Where we look at relationships, the relationships have become very transactional. So I
Right.
want to tie into the perspective of what happens when you say I'm this type of woman, and I'm gonna show I'm this type of woman when I meet this type of man, and at that point that's very transactional.
Right.
I will
Right.
be this for you when you're showing me this from you.
Yeah.
Okay. You can
Yeah.
show me this, I will then become this. My
Right.
thing is, you're either that or you're not that.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. You're either that or you're not that. Because if
Right.
you're going to
Right.
become it once I do something, that means you're not it.
Yeah.
You don't have to become something, you are. right? How do you become something you already are? I'm just
Right.
saying,
No,
if you're
right,
saying I'm
right,
positive, then I don't have to become positive. I'm already positive. I
right.
don't have to become it,
It's
right?
just built in. It's just built in. I can't help myself. It is who I am.
Well, you're already displaying it.
Right.
If the value I feel like I add is contingent upon what somebody else does, then that means I'm not really adding all the value I can. What that
Uh-huh.
means is I have now put a limiter on myself of what value I feel like I want to bring to a role, bring it to a relationship, or bring to a job that is contingent upon those I either work with, those I'm in a relationship with, or, you see what I mean? Or those I
Yeah.
interact
Yeah.
with. So that means I'm limiting what I know I can do because of how others are responding to me.
Right.
I can't control how others respond to me,
Right.
but I
Right.
can control how I move.
I'll show up.
So if I'm going to show up, I need to show up because that's who I am. That's
Right.
what I am. That's
Right.
how I am. And then let others decide on if that's something they are okay with.
Right.
But for me
Right.
to think that, all right, well, if they do this, then I'll show them I can do that. And if the job give me this, then I'll take on more responsibility. And if I,
Then
what,
and you know what? Here's the thing. You might end up losing out.
well, but that ends up happening. The other thing is this: there are times where what you're doing today has nothing to do with where you are.
But where you trying to be?
Back to what I was saying. It's more about where you're trying to be. When I was going back to school and doing all these things, people said, "Well, Rob, you don't need that for the job you're in at the time. You don't need all that education. You don't need this. You're like a house being priced out of the market. You're doing too many renovations.
Right.
Nobody's going to pay that much money in this neighborhood. You basically this job, nobody's going to pay you that money you deserve for that." I said, "I'm not doing this for the job I'm in. I'm doing it for a job that hasn't even been created yet."
That's so good.
You see what I'm
That's
saying?
so
It ain't
good.
even been created yet. What I'm gonna be doing.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
my eclectic skill set hasn't even been combined in a way that people have found value in it. I
Yeah.
have to be able to sell it, but I also have to have people that have vision to be able to see it. Like,
Right.
oh, okay, we can use this and we can do that. So I think sometimes we do things looking for the reward at the time we do it. If I
Right.
do this, I get the reward.
But
No.
that's to the point that you made all the way in the beginning of people being like, I need to see this reward. I need to put it right here in front of the table, and then I'll act right. And that right there is like, even that in and of itself shows a level of just like flawed character that
Well, back to
you
lack of
are
self
doing things.
awareness. Back to
What?
lack of self awareness. Come on now, self awareness now. If me being a stand-up man honoring my word is only contingent upon you,
Right.
then
This
am I
is
truly that type of man? I mean,
You're not.
I'm
You're
only
not.
going to honor my word depending on how you act.
Right. You for the carrot, for the reward. Like literally. So it's more about, you have the ability to do something, but you're only doing it just enough to get whatever the payoff is, not because that is just organically and naturally who you are, which also makes you untrustworthy, because it's hard to say what you're going to be from moment to moment, depending on what the reward is or isn't.
Well, again, it goes back to transaction. It's all reward based.
Right. Right.
If we're saying that who I am today is contingent upon how others show up, then that means I'm at the mercy of whoever I'm around, right?
Right.
I'm
Right.
I'm basically, no matter whatever environment I'm in, I'm gonna decide on what part of me I'm gonna be. My
Right.
thing is this: I'm not this or that. I'm this and that. Okay.
Right.
I don't feel like I got this part that sits over here and this part that sits over here. No, every part of me goes wherever I go. Now, every part of me, I'm not all those things at the same time because I may be, having a different conversation, but it's still there.
Right.
When people try to separate who they are into different locations, okay,
Right.
at work, I'm this way. And then when
Right.
I'm around my friends, I'm this way. And then when I go back to my old neighborhood, I'm this way. And then when I go to the golf, I'm this. No, listen, at that point, you're going to create confusion internally. And
Right.
what do people do when they are chaotic internally? They use external things to fill those voids, okay? So that's where addictions and all type of things come
Right.
from. It's trying to
Right.
fill an internal void with external things.
Right.
So all that trying to fragment ourselves, we don't need to necessarily do. We just need to be willing to accept ourselves.
Right.
So you've heard the
Acceptance
term,
on basis.
right,
Mm,
holistically accept yourself,
yeah.
your flaws and your fears and everything and
And
your
all
thoughts, like
places.
all that. Be willing to accept that. So
Right.
because this I think ties into a lot of what we're discussing. And so I've heard people say, "Oh, the world is flat." Right? I'm not saying I agree for that, but flat stands for an acronym for me to help me remember things.
Okay.
Okay. So My world is flat. So let me explain what that means. F stands for forgiveness, L stands for love, A stands for acceptance, and T stands for trust. If I can't do that for myself, I can't do it for anybody else. Okay.
Okay.
So if
I
I
like
can't
that.
forgive myself, I'll never forgive anybody else.
Right.
If I don't love myself, I'll never love anyone else. If
Right.
I don't accept myself, I'll never accept anyone else. And if I don't trust myself, I'll never trust anyone else.
Right.
Which goes back to the jobs and how you show up in relationships and how you negotiate and all these things.
Right.
Once you can forgive yourself, because we are our own worst critics. Okay.
Right.
Once you can get to the point where you can forgive yourself, then you can actually figure out what it takes to forgive somebody else,
Right.
because it's very humbling.
Right.
Okay. And you'll find yourself like beating yourself up for decisions you made 10 years ago and you still doing it, but yet you think you're going to forgive the person you're in a relationship with. You still ain't forgave yourself about taking a job you shouldn't have took. You see what I'm saying?
Those
Like,
decisions you
back
made.
to good decisions. This is what I'm saying. This is where we are. It all comes full circle, okay?
It does. It
At the
ties
end of
together.
the day, the work is about self-awareness, is self-work. Okay. In
Right.
Christianity, it says know thyself.
Yeah.
In Seven Percenters, it says knowledge of self. In Buddhism, it says enlightenment is the goal.
Yeah.
Okay. Everything points inward,
Yeah.
but yet we looking for all the answers outwardly.
Outside.
Outwardly.
Right.
But
Right.
if you look at all these different groups and missions and like it all points inwardly. So
Yeah.
what does that mean? They say enjoy. They don't say outjoy. They say,
Yeah.
did you enjoy that? Enjoy. Okay. So so the answers that we're looking for are internally,
Right.
which goes
Right.
back to self-awareness, which understands if I can love myself, meaning I'm not causing harm to myself, then I can love somebody else.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I can't accept my own fears and my faults and my failures, if I can't accept that about me, I'll never be able to accept that about somebody I'm with.
Yeah. That's
Because again, to be able to do it for you, meaning most people will treat themselves better, hopefully, than they would do
and they
anything
treat
else.
other people.
I
Yeah.
mean, and if
Right.
you can't do it for you, how you gonna do it for somebody?
Right. Right.
So that's really where the work goes, all around the
Yeah.
board, from a leadership perspective, a partner perspective, an employee perspective, a owner perspective. Like all of it circles around
Yes.
being things,
Right. Right.
being things.
That's really good. That's
Yeah.
really good. I actually was just kind of interested in just tying all these pieces together. Number one, this morning released about forgiveness, and so a lot of the things that you're talking about right now are in that episode too. And then last week, I did a podcast with Saran, and we talked about some of this stuff as well. You being who you are because you are accountable to something else, right? That has nothing to do with what anyone else is doing or not doing. And really, quite honestly, that's a form when you operate that way, when you're transactional like that, that's manipulation. That to your point, it's you trying to control an outcome. If you can guarantee me to get what I want, then I'll do these things, right? Or if you want these things from me, then you'll show up in this way and then you'll get those things from me. You are manipulating this situation. You're trying to use the things that you say you have that are valuable in order to twist and turn. And that is I
They're,
see what you
they're negotiating. They're negotiating. Well, I know what I bring to the table, and so therefore I need this from you.
good.
I'm just saying
Good.
that's what ends up happening. It's like they're doing a business deal. They're negotiating. Hey, I know what social capital I bring. I know who I am, whether they're high value, whatever it is. I need you to do this. This is a negotiation. No pun intended. Well, no pun intended. Yeah, pun intended. I meant that. Yeah, yeah, pun
Unintended.
intended.
That's
Yeah,
good. Well played, Rob.
that's
Well
what it is.
played,
Right.
sir.
They'll say, I'm looking for a partner. I said, oh, you're looking for a deal. You're looking to make a deal. So 80-20, 90-10, 60-40. Like, what are we talking about here? I'm just saying 50-50, 51. You need to have somebody that's majority owner because you got to have a vote if
Oh
you
my
don't get the
God.
rate. Is it 51-49? I mean, what we doing? That's a whole nother
Listen,
conversation. We'll have to
I
get into
walked
it.
right into that one. I
Okay.
should have seen that coming, but I didn't. That's good.
Yeah.
That is good. Well, we got to move away from that. We got to
Okay.
move away from that. And that's a part of the next conversation that we are going to have.
Okay.
100%. You and I have um uh these conversations as well, and they are again filled with so many really good perspectives. And I think that anyone who watches this episode is going to be like, "Oh yeah, listen, whatever Rob got, I gotta have," because obviously this dude is very aware and thoughtful and introspective and insightful about so many different things. And so I really do. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate everything that you have given to this conversation and to me. I do the last thing, and I ask everybody this before we close out. What is the most life changing? But one thing, the most life changing piece of advice you have ever received?
Mm, mm. Wow, that's a great question. Most life changing.
Yeah, yeah.
I
We all
won't.
about perspectives.
Yeah, I won't say. Well, I have a couple. I have a couple.
Okay, you got to pick one, Rob.
I have a couple. So let me do two. I'm gonna do two. I'm gonna do two. One, one, one,
You
one,
negotiate.
one is one thing I received is more relevant for where I am today. The other one I
Okay,
received is something I think will transition through time. The one thing I received was, Rob, you need to live your life by design and not default.
okay, that's a good one.
That's one of my mentors told me. He said, man, you need to live your life by design and not default. Don't just
That's a
take what you can get. Go get what you want, right?
that's
Meaning go look for
good.
opportunities, right? You can
Right
compete for what exists or you can create what isn't.
there, it
Right.
is.
So that was
Right.
one.
Right.
Um, the other one was that relationships are about multiplication and not addition.
Okay,
So
I
one,
like this one already.
listen, one, I know you would like that because you was leading me down path with those questions. So I want to leave with one. So one times one gives you one,
Yeah.
right? One complete person times one complete person gives you one healthy relationship.
Right.
If somebody's a one and somebody's falling short, let's say they're zero point 0.7 and working on something, then you do that times one, you have less than one
Right.
relationship, right?
Right.
So it's not addition. You don't do zero point 0.5 plus zero point 0.5 give you one. That's not the way you approach it. And
Facts.
so it goes back to self-awareness is why I'm saying this, is that's why I think it ties in, is that I still have to do my work to be complete,
Yeah.
right? Not to look for someone or something to complete me, but for
Right.
me to work on being complete. Complete doesn't mean perfect. Complete means
Right.
you understand who you are, you understand where you are, you understand how you are, right? And
Yeah.
you start to have things where you can self-disclose, be aware, and work towards being better. That's a journey of completeness, right? So
Yeah.
what I'm saying to you is sometimes we think we can come in short, but expect the most. And we're gonna have a union that becomes the most. That's not the way that goes.
Right.
One times one gives you one,
Right.
right? And so the same thing that can complete you, if you're needing something to complete you, then that means it can make you incomplete. That's too much power to give someone. If they can complete you, then they can incomplete you.
Mm.
I mean, come on.
Mm.
So a lot of that work goes back to looking inwardly and doing our work on our journey to continue to become, constantly become, to live
Yeah.
at our capacities. And I understand for me, the reason I even put that into my bio is because that's where my growth happens, at expanding my capacity to love.
Yeah.
Even love those that don't love me. And I'm not talking about necessarily in a relationship. I'm just talking about externally to life and different things that are going on in our life, that bitterness hurts us.
Yeah.
So a situation is not about going through it to make you bitter. You go through it to make you better.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. I like that. I like that. That's good. I absolutely agree that it's hugely important. It gives you perspective on, relationships or quite honestly, anything you partner with,
Anything.
because you're only like that idea of you're only as strong as your weakest link. Right. And so if you're a team, now you can plow on by yourself and do your own thing. But if you're a team, if you can only run at this speed and I'm running at this speed, like then I got to throttle back to run at the speed that you run into. So multiplication does
Yeah,
100%.
multiplication, and it
Yeah.
doesn't mean we got to work at the same speed. The
Yeah.
thing becomes, if I'm give just for that example before we go. If you're running at a different speed than me, my role may not be to run the fastest.
Right.
My role may be pick up the pieces.
Right.
Because see, if you're running that fast, it may be things you're dropping that I'm picking up.
Okay.
Which means when I get there at the end, we're still
Perspective.
where we need to be. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't mean we got to be identical. Don't think a one means we're identical.
Okay.
A one means we know who we are, we know where we are, and we know how we are, and we're
Right.
working on being the best us we can be. And then it becomes, can a person accept that though?
Yeah.
See, that becomes the nuance. We ain't got to be both doing the same speed,
Right.
but I do have to have a role in what we're doing, because if I don't have a role in what we're doing, that then creates problems within the union, because people need to feel like they're bringing value to what is.
It facts. Sarah said everybody got to know their role. This
Yeah,
is
we all
listen.
got to know our role
We
and be
all
willing
got
to
to know what
and,
we got to know
and,
what we bring.
and
We
be
got to know
willing
what
to
we
play
bring.
that role, and be willing to play that role.
Play it and be
Right?
happy in it. It's all good.
Yes.
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 Yes. It's
Yeah.
got value.
Listen, it's just like a basketball team, right? If you put all the all stars all on the team, all the best players from each team on one team, right? Which is like the all star team. All right, they're what they are is a team of all stars.
Right.
Okay, that is the sum of action.
Yeah.
Then you have an all-star team, not a team of all-stars, but an all-star team, meaning they play well, meaning they play well together,
Together. Facts.
right?
Facts.
And that is the sum of interaction, not
Right.
the sum of action, the sum of
Right.
interaction, how we play
Okay.
together. An all-star team will be the team of all-stars every time,
Come on.
because the team of all-stars need the ball every time. They need to be the star. An all-star team understands the roles we play. And
Right.
I know where you're going to be before you get there, so the ball's there. Like we play
Already there.
well together.
Come
So I'm
on.
not looking for the best. I'm looking for those that can play well together,
Right. Right.
so that we can be the best. We can be the best.
That's the
I'm
part.
not the
It's
best,
the
but
we.
we can be the best.
We.
That's what we look back to be.
Yeah.
Becoming. It's back to the be, not the
Yeah.
do, the be.
Right.
And
Man,
that's
you in
it.
here preaching this morning, Rob. Preaching. I appreciate you,
Well,
sir.
you inspired. You inspired it. So you thank you for the inspiration and the opportunity to meet with you, and all the people that will be watching and
Yes,
working
yes.
with.
I
I'm
can't
excited.
wait. I
I'm
can't
glad to
wait
be able
to
to
hear it.
support.
I
I'm
can't
glad to
wait.
support.
This
All
is
right.
fantastic. I appreciate you. I told y'all was gonna be blessed by this whole entire conversation, and I know that you are. I hope that the things that you hear or have heard during this conversation are things that you will absolutely apply. It's only as good as what you put into action. You can hear all day long, but if you leave it there, it means nothing. Please put these things into practice so that you can begin to shift how you think, shift what you do, shift the outcomes that you get, and that you get better. Have an amazing week. I'll see you next time. Bye.
See ya.